Hello, and welcome, dear viewer, to an unkind reading. Welcome to my cozy, dreary abode, where hidden amongst the walls lies peeling paint, a structure festering, hungry and furious. Welcome to the macabre, where I, Wyatt, shall be your guide. Step inside out of the rain, grab something warm to drink and eat, for it may be the only warmth awarded to you. If you find this content to your depraved liking, please like, sub, and share so that more ghoulish tales may resonate from these wretched walls. If you are ready, we can begin. Our old house was on a corner, and in lieu of a backyard, had a side yard with a small deck that wrapped around the back end. The dining room had patio doors that led out to the back, and we would have barbecue and such. When I was about 14, we only had one desktop computer and one laptop for the family. My brother and I would always fight over the desktop as that's where the Diablo was installed. So I would use the laptop to write my music. On one particular night, my brother had a friend over. They were downstairs doing whatever, and I was at the dining room table on the laptop. As I was wrapped up in my writings, I didn't pay much attention to my surroundings. I heard a knock at the patio door, which startled me. I looked up, expecting my brother or his friend. The basement had a door that led to the back deck as well. Standing at the door and waving was a person. I couldn't tell whether man, woman, age. They were wearing a Halloween pig mask. Thinking it was my brother and his friend, I mouthed good one, gave them the finger, and walked off. They too were not there when I looked back. As soon as they had left all the way, I had headed downstairs to give them shit. And to my dismay, both boys were sitting on the couch playing the PlayStation. They swore up and down it wasn't either of them, and there was no way one of them could have had time to run and get downstairs and unmask before getting to the couch. To this day, I have no idea who knocked and waved. I came home pretty late one night, and my roommate's bedroom was shut, and I assumed she was sleeping already, but I saw something out of the corner of my eye in the kitchen. I said her name, but she didn't answer. I didn't think anything of it, so I walked into my room, and before I turned the light, something whispered, "I'm still here." I turned on the light in my room, but nothing was there. So I turned every light on in the house and knocked on my roommate's door, and eventually opened, but she wasn't there. So I left her light on too and slept with all the lights on. When she came back the next morning, I asked if she had been messing with me, and she started crying and said she left because something in the house was messing with her and telling her that she needed to get out. A family friend of mine used to work in private wealth management. One of her jobs was diversification of her clients' assets in the stock market. Out of nowhere, she gets a call from a representative of one of her very big private clients to sell all the stocks on a big airline and move the liquidity somewhere else. No buts, and if needed, they could sell up to 5% below market share. It needed to be sold quickly. The This was extremely weird, as the stock price of the company was pretty stable, and specifically this client's portfolio was heavily hedged with this stake, but she didn't think much of it. Oftentimes her clients did this for personal reasons, such as having a bad experience on a plane or the company or set up plans, whatever. 2 days later, one of her colleagues that she shared this peculiar story told her how the airline's stock prices started slowly but surely falling. Some people were selling off their shares, which were gladly brought on and bought by the market at increasingly lower prices, and then higher as it stoke. The next day, AA Flight 11 crashed into the North Tower of WCC in New York. The stock market closed for another week. When I was 17 and worked in retail as a cashier, I had a very old, odd couple that came through my line buying a walk. Husband was at least 85, starting trying to make conversation about walks and variety of things, but led on to the conversation about asking if I liked Chinese food. I said, of course. Do you want to go out with me and get some Chinese? He winks. No, sir, I said, coy. Oh, well. He looks a bit disappointed and turns to look at his wife, who's on the phone with someone. Would you at least like to come home with me and live in my basement? No. The rest of the transaction was taken in terrified silence. His wife never said a word. I wonder to this day if he was trying to make a joke, because he sounded so sincere, or if he was suffering from dementia or something else that made him, not realize how creepy that sounded to say someone so young, young enough to be your great-grandchild, maybe even great-great-grandchild. I still think about the way his eyes looked. He looked genuine. New Year's Day, 1995. I was in the middle of the third year university. A bunch of friends had come down to visit me and my roommate for some festivities. We were all pretty hungover from drinking that night before, and went out for the usual nice day out, bit chilly, I don't feel so good, post-greasy breakfast hungover stroll around the neighborhood. Two of these friends were twin brothers. One of them we hung out with regularly. The other we'd only really just met the night before, and he seemed pretty normal at first, joining in on the fun, having a good time with us. But on this day, we were all hanging around the local basketball court, shooting some hoops with an old basketball we found in the grass. This twin brother kept following me at a very close pace, walking around with this odd look in his eyes. As the time went on, his face kept developing a creepier demeanor, until when he looked at me, it was the most frightening eyes I had seen in my life, staring right into the nether regions of my soul the whole time. I just get this feeling. I'd back away and join the group again, and he'd keep following me around. When we were walking back to the apartment, it was just me and him, walking down the sidewalk behind the group. And then he moved in front of me out of a sudden. He stared at me with that odd, creepy look again. He fell to his knees, bowing and raising his hands to me. I didn't know what to do. I kept trying to play it off. Hey, buddy, you all right? Not getting drunk again, are you? Well, hey, we're heading back now. You ready to go? He wouldn't say anything. He'd just be there on his knees, looking up to me with a clenched, tight face, squinting eyes, as if he were looking directly into the sun. Later that day, my roommate said he was tripping balls or something, so I thought nothing of it and moved on with my life. A few weeks later, we got a phone call from the twin brother we hang out with. It turned out that his twin brother, he went over to his aunt's place. He went there with a knife and stabbed her 14 times. Thankfully, she didn't die, but, still really bad. He had even called the police beforehand, before going to do this to her, because he knew he was going to do it, but he couldn't stop himself from doing it. He said he had to. He was told to. The ensuing court case was wildly covered. You likely saw it on local media. We have a relatively smaller community where such a thing does not happen on a regular basis. I was reading one of the articles when one of the testimonies was from that twin brother. It talked about his severely schizophrenic episode, about hearing a voice in his head. He believed in his very bones that his aunt was a demon and that he was commanded by God to do so, to kill her. So who was this God that told him to go and kill her? Well, as the newspaper article described, he kept speaking about a fine fellow and a group of friends that he got to spend time with on New Year's Day. How he spent time watching, reading about him, meeting him when they were younger through his brother, idolizing him to the point of having a small area in his room dedicated to this God, this being upon light. It didn't take me long to realize, well, this was 22 years ago. I know for a fact that it was mental illness, but just knowing that I had somehow commanded him to go and kill his aunt, those eyes still stick with me to this day. The way he was on his knees. We were living with my brother-in-law and his 2 teens when I was pregnant. He has an elevated house on quite a bit of former hunting land, several miles down the county line. One day, home alone, I was taking a shower and felt someone staring at me. I stuck my head out and listened. Couldn't hear anyone in the house, so I resumed my shower. A while later, I heard the back door shut. I was standing in the kitchen and could see the door, and it was... Here's the thing about that door. It had no major steps and was 6 feet from the ground. Door was still locked. I told my husband that night, and he just shrugged it off. We locked down and went to bed. I don't know how long I'd been asleep, but I woke up to the blankets being yanked off my bed, that I was being flipped and held open as my brother turned on every light in the house. He threw open every door, every cabinet, looking in every pantry and closet while holding a handgun. I asked what was going on, and he swore he heard boots thumping through the house and someone talking. Something was everything was still locked. It's not a big house. Nobody was there except for us that night. A week later or so, my niece came into our room. Her dad worked over the weeks, and of course they stayed there with us, and asked if she could sleep in our bed. Now, this girl isn't much scared of anything, and is 14 at this time. I sat up and told my husband to scoot over and patted my pillow. That is when I watched her 16-year-old brother come in and curl up into a blanket on the floor beside me. Why are the both of you in our room at 2 in the morning? They didn't answer at first. It took them a long moment before they explained that something in my niece's room was laughing. I hated that room when I came in. There's this feeling about it. The kind of feeling that makes you do the laundry very quickly, moving in and taking it out. You don't want to spend too much time there. I asked my nephew why he was on the floor, and he said, "She came into my room on the cot, and we slept, but then something started knocking on the door. We came in here as soon as it stopped." Again, my husband flipped on every light, looked in every cranny and nook. Nothing. Eventually he moved out, and the kids decided to live full time with Grandma. My husband said he heard a man laughing in my niece's room, but there was nobody there when he turned on the light. To this day, it scares the shit out of him when he has to tell the story. I was a young girl at the time, no more than 7 or 8. I was walking down the street when I saw a rusty nail in the road. Now, thinking of what they can do to cars, I picked it up and threw it into an empty house's yard. After I threw the nail, a man came out of what I thought was an empty house and shouted at me. I freaked out, thinking that it was because of the nail. I gave my apologies and began walking, heading towards my home. The guy didn't sound mad, but I couldn't make out exactly what he was saying as he was getting closer. He started following me down the street and gesturing me to come over, but my gut told me to keep walking, keep going. I get home and see from my house, the empty house is now surrounded by cops. At this point, I know that it's something worse than whatever I could have thought before. After a while, whatever was going on, there was lots of screaming and shouting, and men in full gear started showing up. I later would find out that the house was indeed supposed to be empty, but these men were known drug addicts, and 1 or 2 of them had been hardened criminals, having just killed someone. I very much almost ended up a hostage. My 3-year-old, who is normally happy-go-lucky, was extremely concerned the other day. He kept looking around the room, talking about the rhino, who knows what a 3-year-old's mind when translating the word rhino. This went on for about 20 minutes. He was very concerned, looking around the entire time. So we get to the point where he says the rhino is moving. My wife asks, "Where is the rhino?" "He's coming for Daddy." "So yeah, I'm Daddy, and my ass is puckered tight." Fast forward to 4 days later, last night, bear in mind, and he starts talking about a ghost or something. My daughter asks, "Where's the ghost?" My son says he's biting Daddy. What the actual fuck? I was rambling down an old country highway in northwest Georgia on my motorcycle. It's a 750 Vulcan. When I spotted an ambulance coming the opposite way. Do the right thing, I pull over, and behind me, a pickup truck begins to pull up. Now, I only then, after a moment, notice in my rearview mirror, I see the passenger get out with a baseball bat and starts hustling towards me. I couldn't even look behind me with my head. I simply dropped what gear I had in my hands, and I hauled ass. What followed was the most harrowing experience I've had in my entire life, as this pickup truck proceeds to chase me all around the place for 20 minutes, going up and down roads. Now, I'm unfamiliar with the area, and my bike was not meant for going this fast on such tight turns. So I've got no room for error, and it's everything I can do to stay out in front of these guys while also avoiding striking anything. I'm blowing through four-way intersections in a bid to get some distance and come up with a plan, but they are hell-bent on catching me. I finally manage to get to the point towards the highway and into cover of other cars, but then the traffic stops over the bridge. The truck is 3 cars behind me. I can see the face of the driver, sticking their head outside the car, pointing at me. And I'm thinking, if I can just get out of the highway lane, I'm probably home free. Why? Because Vulcans are known for being very fast, moving in a straight goddamn line. In my mirrors, I can see the passenger snaking out of the car, climbing out and making way directly to me. So I lane split illegal in Georgia, but I didn't give a single shit. I made it on that on-ramp, hammered down, and I am gone, baby, gone. I never went back there. As far as I know, this was an unprovoked attack by some, I don't know, hillbilly types. Because prior to the ambulance, I hadn't even seen another vehicle. I don't ride particularly fast, and I don't believe in loud pipes. I got lucky as hell, seeing him come up behind me like that. If I didn't hit, if I didn't hit my way out of there. My sophomore year in college, I ran into this guy that was a year younger than me. Let's call him Mitch. Mitch and I were acquaintances that ran in the same circles. He was a nice guy, smart, and very quiet. At parties, he would fold these really cool 3D shapes in the corner instead of interacting. He would always just watch everybody. Anyway, I ran into him at the bus stop, and I stopped to say hello. We had a awkward conversation about our majors, him physics and me psych, and eventually it came across we began to discuss a mutual friend of ours. This mutual friend had recently gone into the army, foregoing college, and so I asked him if he still kept in contact. He said yes. I said, great, would you mind passing me his number? He opened his wallet and pulled out a single piece of paper, the only thing that was in there. It was our friend's name, university address when he went there, and phone number. On the backside of it, it had his specific schedule and times. He began writing on it and handed it to me. We exchanged glances, but to avoid any awkwardness, I nodded and quickly got onto my bus. I'm sitting here with his number, with this paper. I don't know if I should call a mutual friend or to even tell him about all this. I don't know what to do next. I work as a cable tech. I once went into the basement that I still have nightmares about. There was a single pull string light in the center of the room, so I couldn't really see much until I turned it on. But the walls down the stairwell were covered in old newspapers. I am used to dark basements, so going in to turn on the light was nothing I wasn't prepared for. But it didn't prepare me for this. All the walls had different newspapers articles on it. Each one had different sales for different dolls throughout the years. Different caregiving dolls, dolls about birthing or drinking, vomiting, Some of them stretch back to the 1920s or 30s. In the corner there was a black and white framed picture on the wall, and below it was a large child-sized porcelain doll propped up in a chair with a super old-looking cradle beside it. I stayed, and I did my job, but I still can't shake this feeling of something when I think about it. This is a story from my mother. This is her story telling you to please do not ever do this. She was home alone for a while and was expecting a friend to come over and was taking a shower. In case her friend came while she was in the shower, she left a note on the front door saying, "I'm in the shower, come on in." While she was in the shower, she heard a knocking on the bathroom door, and she said, "I'll be right out." When she got out of the shower, nobody was there. She walked through thinking that at some point she would be able to see her best friend somewhere throughout the house. It was only at that moment, as she looked through her window, that she saw that her friend was finally pulling up to the house. Remember, lock your doors. I have dogs that bark at anybody. My mother does not live with me. She does not live with me, nor does she have a key to the house. About 4 years ago, I am sitting in my house alone, aside from, of course, my dogs, off from work. Both of my boys are hovering over me, one at my feet and one by the doorway leading to the hallway. It's quiet. I am spending time, Redditing, watching YouTube videos, or doing whatever else on the internet through my phone. I hear my mother's voice clearly saying, "Brian," like she was trying to get my attention from across the house. I just perked my head up and made my way looking a little stunned. As I did, however, my dogs also perked up. So they did, and they started to growl fiercely in the direction of the voice. It caused my hair to raise on end. Together, the three of us began to inspect the house. One of my boys stayed firm in his position, while the other stood by me. But there was nothing there. This happened quite a few years ago when I was in uni. My friends and I were living on a ground floor flat, and my room was at the front of the building. Outside my window was a front garden. My boyfriend at the time and I had literally just finished having sex, and I put my head on the pillow and glanced to the right, which is where the window lays. There was a gap between the curtain and the window, and I was met with a pair of eyes that were watching me. We both, me and the peeper, had the instinct to look away and then quickly look back. At this point, I shouted to my ex that there was someone watching us from outside. He jumped, opened the window, and shouted various amusing warnings. He could see that the grass was disturbed, so someone was there, and by the looks of it, more than once. From further inspection the next morning, we found that they had jumped the small hedge and exited through my neighbor's garden. We never experienced it again, or at least, we never noticed it happen again. I'm a nurse, and I used to work day shift at my old job. I was walking down the hallway with my computer on wheels, my COW, to pass meds out from one afternoon. I was in between two patients' rooms, not really close to either door, and far away from the nurse's station and the kitchenette. I could hear one of the physicians and the physical therapist talking to a patient in one of the rooms, but no one else was in the hallway. I was looking down at my papers to kind of get myself organized before going to see another patient. All of a sudden in my ear, like someone was standing right behind me, I heard a female voice say, "I'm cold," in kind of a jokey way. I'm like someone would do in a big shiver and rub their arms and say, "Brr, I'm cold." I turned around thinking it was my friend Brittany who was goofing around, but there was no one there. There was no one in the hallway except for me. I waited a moment, hoping that someone would just be around the side of the hall. Too much time went by, and I went to look. No one was down the main hall either. It was a cozy, calm night. My wife and our two friends are hanging out one evening, chatting away. My son and his friends, or the son of one of the people that were hanging out with us, they were both asleep in his room. The four of us hear a blood-curdling scream. I swear it was her son's, and she swears it was my son's. Either way, she races through the kitchen and runs into the room to see what had happened. Well, nothing. They were sound asleep. She comes back through the kitchen to tell us and freezes in terror. Every single door and drawer is open. All 23 we counted. In 10 seconds that she was gone, the kitchen was opened in full. 6 of them are high enough to be out of reach to anyone except for me. We didn't sleep too well that night. We have a Wii, you see. The sensor bar is on the TV, stand directly in front of the TV, as is anyone's. We don't have the cord wrapped up or anything like it. We just have it hanging there for the TV in a jumble, kind of back or around or anything. One night, we were watching TV, cuddling up on the couch, when suddenly the Wii sensor bar literally flies across the room till it got to the end of its length and fell forward. Like someone had grabbed it and chucked it across the room. We could find no explanation as our quick assessment came that neither of our feet were anywhere near the cord. We had a cat and a dog at the time, but the cat was fast asleep in the other room, and the dog was on the couch with us. I am a teacher of adult students, so you can gather one of the students of mine, they can be kind of intense and creepy, and I can't so easily requisition that they are an issue. Actually, she's based at another school, but specifically started attending classes at my school after meeting me. When I first started, she kept giving me welcome presents as I was new to the country. Just simple things like food and postcards, books, and the like, which was nice but was getting a little excessive. She added me on social media and then got upset when I didn't reply to her constant messages. I told her that I don't really use social media. Anyway, I didn't see her for a few months, and I figured she'd just gone back to her own town or school or stopped studying whatsoever, and was relieved that she'd clearly gotten bored of me. Last week, she comes in and gives me an envelope full of photos of me doing lessons that she'd been taking. Years ago, when I was a senior in high school, I had a day where I wasn't feeling so good. So I decided, as I occasionally did, to skip out on my last two classes and head home. That meant no school bus, obviously, so I would be walking 3 miles home. Before the age of computer cell phones, this was a pretty long, boring hike to take, so I decided to take a shortcut through a small wooden trail along the creek. Eventually, I came across a dead cat lying in the middle of the trail. As I walked around it, I noticed another dead cat to my left. I looked to my right, and sure enough, there was another. Creeped out, I looked behind me and I noticed two more, and yet two more in front of me. They were laid out in a giant circle, with one in the middle, almost like a half-assessed ritual or something crazy like that. I speeded up the pace and got the hell out of there. I never took that trail again. Thinking back, a really weird thing is that there was no visible damage to any of the cats. To cause blood or bleeding, they just looked dead. When I was 12, my cat went missing in the summer. We lived in the country near a lot of farms, and he was an indoor-outdoor kind of cat, but he would come in every night for his dinner. He hadn't shown up for 2 days, and I'd been roaming around the fields looking for him. The second night, I had a vivid dream where I saw him lying on his side in the field, dead, with his neck snapped and his tongue hanging out. The next morning, I went out as soon as I woke up and walked exactly where his body was, in the field about 600 yards from my house. He looked just as he did in my dream, down to the position of his body and the tongue being hanging out. We figured he got his neck snapped by a coyote or a dog or something of the like. Creeped me right out, and I strongly believe that the dreams can tell you things if you only pay attention. Since then, I had a dream. I've had other dreams, more than one, that have come true, warning me of things. And this was the most vivid. It was like a photograph, and 20 years later I can still see the image clear as day. Rest in peace, my sweet Maxie. Before I get into our final story, remember to please like and subscribe. It helps in the algorithm. As well, if you want to go ding ding, the bell icon always shows a personalized interest that can bring us up, making things easier for you to know when we bring out this content, as well as our gaming channel, our streaming channel, and our future plans across the board. As well, if you enjoy unsettling and creepy things. My fellow streamer, Oz, is going through the Fran Bow series. Please give that a check out, as we all like spooky things that go bump in the night. I was once working as a live-in staff member in a college dormitory. During the summer, we housed the few summer school students who remained on campus, usually around 30. It may be significant to point out these students tended toward highly academically motivated, often high-stress students, if quiet. One warm day, in a late June, my office received a call from a concerned sibling that she and her family were unable to reach her brother, who lived by himself in a room on the summer school floor. This wasn't unusual, as our office frequently dealt with students avoiding the kith and kin due to frayed nerves or general social awkwardness. Our normal protocol is to check on the student and to try and check on them by our emergency contact information. Failing that, go to check on their room to verify they're living in the building and perhaps available, and there, then have them call their family to verify that we followed up on their original request. Also, we are to only enter the room of another staff member present to ensure personal safety, not only of the staff but of the student. I failed to reach the student on his room and mobile phone and was working short staff, so I made the decision that I was going on my own. I decided to pop up to his room and check on him. I arrived on his floor at 2 in the afternoon. The floor seemed deserted as usual. I found his room number and immediately noticed the sound of the movie playing on the TV or computer behind the door. I knocked 3 times and announced that I was a staff member checking on his health and safety. No answer. I didn't think that this was remarkable. College students are notorious for leaving electronics on while they're not in the room. I checked the floor, showers, and bathrooms and found them deserted. I returned to his room, knocked 3 more times, waiting 20 seconds or so for each knock. No answer. This is when my instincts started to buzz. I worked in residence halls for a number of years as a professional, and something about the pieces of this puzzle weren't really adding up. Family concerned about his safety and health, electronics running. Someone must have started them recently within the time frame of the movie runtime. Summer school students and their idiosyncrasies and their behaviors. Something just wasn't right here. I was by myself, so I probably let myself get more worked up than if I had someone else. I deserted dorm floor, even at 2 p.m., often evokes a Kubrick memories of the Overlook Hotel. I decided that for some sense of closure or sanity, I needed immediate resolution of keying into the student's room, even though I was by myself and not technically supposed to do this. I knocked on the door 1 more time for good measure. Again, announced myself as the hall director. I keyed the room, and my spider senses went off even stronger. The room appeared relatively vacant. The student appeared to be living out of a suitcase, which is extremely unusual for someone staying no less than 8 weeks for summer school sessions. The bedding was tussled like someone had been sleeping in it, and all the lights in the room were on. And as I suspected, there was a laptop open on the desk running on battery power, playing The Matrix. But no student. I began to start rationalizing to keep from feeling unsettled. Surely the student had crossed paths on my way to his room. I'd never met him before, so odds are I didn't recognize what he looked like. And perhaps he was just down the lobby, picking up books, picking up delivery for food, or picking up lunch. There's got to be something rational here. Then I turned to leave, planning on trying to reach the student later on in the afternoon or evening. As I turned to leave, I noticed another odd piece of evidence. The accordion closet doors, which are removed in most rooms due to disuse, particularly single rooms like his, they were still in the room, and they were closed. It was very odd. I couldn't remember the last time I actually saw someone use those cranky, dysfunctional things. Then my intuition spiked even higher than ever. Shit. I realized that I was alone in a room with a potential suicide student who may, in fact, have completed that act. And I'm about to be that guy who discovers the body and then has this shitstorm of paperwork and undesirable tasks. I know that shouldn't be the issue going through my mind, but least of which, of course, is calling the family and having to break the news and talk to them. I felt like I was talking to myself when my voice cracked as I spoke. The closed doors and announced my name and title, and that I was to be opening them in 3 seconds. I fumbled with the door's latch, finally managing to get them disengaged, and as I slid the door apart, I was extremely unprepared. I don't know what I was expecting. A hanging, a gunshot wound. I'll tell you what I didn't expect. A 7 foot, dark skinned Indian man staring at me embarrassingly as though I had found his secret hangout. We stared at each other for a good 15 seconds without blinking, breathing, or speaking. I finally realized what was going on, and my natural emotions was disbelief. All I could think of was to say, you, are you in here hiding from me? He looked at me and said, yeah. My heart still racing, I turned to leave, and before I shut the door, I turned back to him and said, call your fucking sister. She's worried about you, and frankly, I am too. This has been an unkind reading. Thank you, dear listeners, for giving it a shot and being willing to step into my mind for a few more moments. If you have any interests or any personal horror stories, please post them in the bottom of this video. I will happily read them out. As well, you are always welcome. If you follow the link to our YouTube channel, you will also find our Discord. There you will find a fun-loving community that are very engaged, and we love to be able to speak to and engage with. Message us on there, post as you will. Of course, rules apply. But there'll be a new tab. There will be horrifying ideals and strange oddities and the like. Unkind reading is done by myself, Wyatt Smith. Thank you. And always remember that on dreary nights and dark days, the best thing you can do is to warm yourself up, curl up close, and listen to unsettling tales.